This is the Tamron 50-400. I've been playing with it today out here on Connect Glacier, filming some ice climbers, and I gotta say, I'm really impressed by this thing. It's 50 millimeters to 400 millimeters. It goes from f4.5 to f6.3, 67 millimeter front filter thread. It has the USB-C port, so you can program the switches to what you want, and it has vibration compensation built inside. Hey, my name's Jake and I create content here to help solo creators on the go. So I test and review drones, cameras, lenses in places like this in Alaska, and I teach you the skills you need so that you can earn money from your videography or photography. Okay, I've been shooting with this for a bit now, and I just have fallen in love with this. Not only is this a great lens for all kinds of different things like landscapes out in places like this, but also for portrait work, for wildlife. I mean, this really is, I think, maybe going to fall in line to be one of the best kind of all-around lenses if you're going to do stuff, travel places like this, go and do wildlife stuff or landscape stuff or all that, because the amount of reach and the ability to be able to zoom in really close, like here with these paragliders, or into the landscape like here with these mountain peaks and some of the fresh snow that we're already getting, even though it's only barely even the beginning of September. This lens gives you so much versatility. So for photo work, this lens is great for a lot of different things because you can use it in landscapes and you can use it to punch in and get some of the detail in landscapes in a lot of different places, but it also works really well as a wildlife lens. And so if you are somebody like me who travels to a lot of places like this where you want to really take just one or maybe two lenses with you and be able to cover a lot of different subject material, this lens is almost ideal because you can start at 50 millimeters and go all the way to 400, which makes it absolutely fantastic. The image quality coming out of this lens is really great. You get really good contrast, you get really good sharpness, you get very good color rendition, which I've really been impressed by how well the color rendition out of this is. And you also actually can get really nice sun stars, which is great, but the glare flare control is done really pretty well overall. And like most lenses, if you stop this lens down about 1 or 2 stops from wide open at any focal length, the image quality improves across the board. So you get really good image quality, really good sharpness in the center, pretty much wide open all the way across. The corners improve from, I would say, very good to pretty much excellent as soon as you stop down 1 or 2 stops on the aperture. And they stay that way all the way through into f11 or so. In photo mode, I mean, obviously the A7 IV is limited to how many frames a second it can shoot. But even with the A7S III or the Alpha 1, I only was able to reach about 12 frames a second, maybe 14 frames a second, and that's pretty typical. Third-party lenses on Sony cameras do not allow the maximum frames a second shooting modes that a lot of the Sony cameras have. But still, 10 to 12 frames a second with this is admirable, and it's more than enough for anything I shoot. If you're gonna shoot a lot of really high-speed action sports, that's probably somewhere you're gonna wanna upgrade to another lens, maybe a native lens from Sony. Another thing that really stood out to me about this lens is the close focus distance. It's considerably closer than any of the other similar focal range lenses on the market. I don't remember the exact macro reproduction rate, it'll be right down here, but being able to get that close to a subject and get a really good sharp photo gives you very macro-like reproduction capabilities, which is just giving you a lot more options in one lens to be able to go out. Now, of course, when you're at 400 millimeters or when you're zoomed out, that close focus distance is quite different, but it's still actually fairly close, and you're able to get some very cool compositions with this lens because of that close focal range. And on the autofocus, this lens is a great performer. It locks quickly. It works with eye detect and face detect autofocus on Sony cameras, and it works really well. I found that I had a very low miss rate, at maybe 5% of my shots when I was shooting a lot of really higher speed stuff with a lot of action, a lot of motion in there. I don't have a lot of that material to show you, unfortunately, because it's not mine and I was hired to do it, but it did work very well and gave me a lot of options. And then also the fact that you can customize this, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute, means that you can set it up in the custom button here. You can set up to be able to be close focus only or far distance focus only, or you can set it up to do almost anything. And the VC mode button here will give you options for how you want the stabilization to work. So if you're doing kind of general, VC mode 1 is pretty much what you want. That will cover a wide range of different shooting ability. But then if you're gonna do a lot of panning stuff or you're doing left to right stuff, that's where you wanna use VC mode 2. That is built more specifically to panning left and right. When it comes to video performance, this lens does an incredible job. You can get a lot of really great variety of shots. You can punch way in to show your subject. And being that you can start at 50 millimeters all the way zoomed out at 50 millimeters, gives you a lot of options to be able to compose a shot the way you want. And one thing I love about telephoto cameras like this is being able to compress the background and the foreground, your subject, to show a really true to life representation of how large an area is in comparison to your subject, which makes this lens absolutely fantastic for being able to run and gun and film lots of different types of video, lots of different types of photo work. Yeah, the image quality coming out of this in video mode is excellent across the board. The sharpness is great. The autofocus works fantastic, and it's dead silent, so you get absolutely no autofocus sound, and it's extremely quick. And on the image stabilization in video mode, I already talked a little bit about it in photo mode, but it helps a tremendous amount, especially when you're shooting 50 to 100, maybe 200 millimeters. It gets hard to handhold anything out at 400 millimeters. I've had that issue with any lens, even the Sony GM lens, although I think overall the image stabilization performance of the Sony GM lens is marginally better. There is a little bit of improvement there, but I was surprised how close these came and how well they perform together. And also on the video specs, because you can customize this, which we'll talk more about in a sec, is the fact that you can turn this to be a linear focus ring, and the focus breathing is very minimal on this lens. It's actually quite good, impressively good. And the sharpness and color rendition on this lens is excellent in video mode. It's really spectacular. And because you have such a massive focal range, you can really push in and blur the background out. And on that, the background blur on this lens, the out of focus areas, the bokeh, is really spectacular. They've done a great job. It's just smooth, it's nice. I don't see a lot of onion rings or weirdness in any of the bokeh balls or anything like that. That being said, there is one downside, and that's the zoom ring. It's a little on the stiff side, so it makes it a little difficult to get a smooth zoom, but it does get a little easier over time as far as the operation of it, and I think that's just probably as the lens works in. And also the vibration compensation works well handheld up to about 200 millimeters, but above 200 millimeters, it just is hard to hold anything steady enough. And I mean, realistically, if you're holding it out at 400 millimeters handheld, that can really be a challenge. So I would say either mount it on a tripod, a good heavy duty tripod, or you know, you can also get a lens collar for this, but definitely it makes it much harder past 200 millimeters to get a good steady shot. When it comes to build quality and weather sealing, all of that, I've owned a lot of Tamron lenses now, all the way from the original 28 to 75 when they released that for the Sony. I bought the A7 III, and I put that thing through all kinds of horrific weather, from way below zero temperatures to a lot of rain and waterfalls and everything else you can imagine. This is built as well or better than that. The one issue that I've had is that the weather sealing on the back, at least on this version, is a little tight. Now it's gotten better as I've used it, but I think the weather seal on the back is just a little large, and so it makes it a little tight to get on and off my body. Not to where I'm worried about anything being too tight, but it just definitely is very well sealed back there with that rear seal. And I can say that even though this is an extending zoom camera, here you can see it, you know, extends out quite a bit. All the other Tamron lenses that I have, which I have quite a few, are very well weather sealed, and I've never had an issue with dust getting inside. Now, I have seen issues with that with other third-party brands, but the Tamrons for me have been fantastic over the last 3 or 4 years that I've been shooting with them. So I am pretty confident that this lens is going to handle a lot of abuse and bad weather. Even out here today and other places, it's been in the rain, it's been in glacier ice caves where lots of water is dripping off the ceiling, and it's been fine. And other trips I've taken, it's handled rain, winds, dust, no problem, no matter where I've been. And like all the other Tamron lenses, it's this sort of engineered plastic that for me has held up well, even hiking and doing the stuff that I do with them. All of my Tamron lenses have held up well. Some of them have a few scratches, but that's more on me for abusing them pretty hard. So on the design, you have the zoom ring, you have the focus ring, which again, like I said earlier, you can program it to be very specific on how you want it to operate. You have this lock button here that will lock the zoom from going out when you're traveling, which is very handy. And then you have the custom button here, which is 3 positions. I've got mine set up for the different the ways I want it to focus, whether I want it to be near field focus only, or only far field focus, etc. You can set that up to be a lot of different things. We'll talk about that more in a sec. And then you have the vibration compensation or the optical steady shot built in the lens here, which is mode 1, mode 2, and off. And you also have a focus holder, a custom programmable button on the side of the lens, which is great. I love the fact that Tamron's putting in all of these options, and the fact that you can plug this into a computer via USB-C and program most of these things to do exactly what you want. So I have mine set up to be a very linear focus ring. I like very linear. If I'm doing focus pulls, you can set it to be non-linear if you want. You can set this up to be an aperture ring if you want. And then you can also set it how much you want to have to turn it, between a lot of different options on how far you have to turn it in order to get it to focus correctly. And then of course you've got a lot of options for what you can program these switches for, and that makes this lens really a great deal. And that's where we're going to jump into the fact that this is the smallest and the lightest lens out of any of the 100 to 400 range lenses. It's a couple hundred grams lighter than the Sony version. It's a little bit smaller than that, and it's lighter than the Sigma version as well. So if you're like me and you're traveling a lot, or you're hiking a lot, or you're in small aircraft or kayaks where weight and size is an issue, but you want to have something like this where you could pair this with a 16 to 35 or something like that, and then pretty much have everything covered, then this lens is one of the better options, because at $1,300 you're getting fantastic performance out of a great lens that is also lighter weight and smaller than the competitors on the market. Now, there are a couple of reasons you might want to get the Sony, and like I said earlier, if you want the absolute best image quality, the Sony is just a little better. And if you want the high-speed shooting ability of the A9 or the A1 or something like that, where you want to be able to shoot the full 30 frames a second, then the Sony is going to be better. If you're looking for budget lenses for Sony cameras, you're going to want to watch this video right here. I go through a whole bunch of budget lenses that I've used on Sony cameras for years. They're fantastic. I'll see you there. As always, if you have questions, ask me in the comments below, or join my live stream Wednesday nights at 4 p.m. Alaska time, 8 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you again soon in the next video. Cheers.